Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this regular meeting of the Cowlitz County Board of Commissioners. I'd please like to ask if you're able to please rise and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Today, we will begin with reviewing the minutes of our meetings from last week. We will then consider the consent agenda. That's basically routine matters, but we'll try to answer any questions that you have. And we usually take a motion to approve with one action. But if anything needs to be separately considered, all you have to do is make that request. We have a single motion item today. And then after that, we do have a closed record hearing. Most of the time, your county commission performs in two types of governmental functions. One is administrative, where we have oversight over various departments, not all departments, but most departments. We also have oversight over the budget and the finances. That's administrative or executive. Then we also establish policy decisions, passing ordinances, resolutions, those kinds of things. That's the legislative function. Occasionally, we actually perform a judicial function. We don't robe up like the judges do. But that deals with judgments being made over the uses of people's property. And we have one of those cases before us today. It is called, under state law, it's called a closed record hearing. That is not like any of the other hearings that we have. Only the people who have participated in the Planning Commission hearings are eligible. They're inside the closed door for that hearing. So I know we have entertained comments on all the other different issues in the past, but when we're doing this quasi-judicial thing, the state law says it's limited to those who've participated in the earlier planning commission. So that's a little bit different in routine. We certainly will have time for public comment. I think the agenda says the public comment comes after bid openings. Well, I'm sure that bid openings are usually at 11. We usually, hopefully will be done before 11, but we'll make sure we have a public comment. Mr. Mortensen, did I touch the bases on the closed hearing requirements?
On the closed hearing?
Right.
Yes, that was clear. Thank you.
Okay. So with that in mind, let's hear a report on last week's minutes.
As usual, I reviewed the minutes of the activities last week and I move to approve those minutes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 So vote aye. Before we do the consent agenda, I actually owe this commission an apology for a letter that I signed about 10 days ago. Towards the end of the day, it was a letter working with and joining Patriot Rail and asking the federal government for an extension on our time period to negotiate. They announced probably 5 years ago that they wanted to abandon the old Weyerhaeuser Railroad tracks from Ocean Beach Highway all the way over around through Longview and Kelso and past Beacon Hill over the bridge to Ostrander. And under federal law, the feds treat railroads that received their property through the right of eminent domain way back when that happened. If they want to abandon the railroad, they have to give local governments an opportunity to protect the public's interest in maintaining what they call a rail bank. That is, we set aside that property in case the railroad needs to come back. And in the meantime, we can use it for trails. And And so most of the last 5 years have been trying to get a price from them to decide if it's even practical for us to do that. And they've not been very timely in that. We've gone through extension after extension. So when I was, we began the negotiations under former Building and Planning Director Elaine Placido. When she left, and we realized that the whole thing does involve the city of Longview and Kelso, we turned it over to the governmental conference to finish the negotiations. We got a message from them. We need to sign this letter asking for an extension. And so I read the first letter, skimmed through it. Yeah, that's what we were doing. That's what we talked about. It's consistent with what the counties wanted all along. The error was on my part. I ignored page 2, and page 2 actually had a question for more information from us and would lead a reader to believe we'd already decided how we're going to pay for it. We didn't do any of that stuff. Arn caught it last week and he's rewritten it. It's on the agenda for today. Thank you, Arn, for catching that error. My mistake. Totally responsible. I don't expect that to happen again. So please accept my apologies. Now, for the consent agenda, we have an agreement, a supplemental agreement number 1 with a consultant, a company called Parametrics. They provide us with general civil engineering services. We have them on contract and they review actions, and it's all paid for by applicants if it's a land use action. But this allows us to use their services and charge as is appropriate. This amendment will allow us to continue them through the end of 2024 and extending the maximum payable from $200,000 to $500,000. The second one is a similar type of an agreement with another company called PBS Engineering and Environmental. Same thing, extending we've been using them all along, so we've used up the $200,000, and now we are extending that up to $500,000. Next, we have an annual certification and digital submission approval for a state agency called the County Rural Administration Board, which, if you think about that acronym, it's CRAB. So the CRAB board reviews counties on road construction and maintenance dollars that they give to us from the state, from the gas tax that you all pay at the gas pump. Portion of that comes back to us. And then this agency, which is actually controlled by county officials, they review and check, make sure we use the money properly. So we're going to be submitting that to them for their review. They'll be back to us a little bit later this year. Under our letters, notices, we have 2 from FERC, that Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that keep us up to date on their review of conditions along the Lewis River. One is a review of the various safety plans that Pacific Corps has submitted. They've all been approved. And another one accepting an alternative to a trail that they were supposed to put in paralleling International Paper Road. I don't know why they sent us the postcard, because International Paper Road is actually in Clark County. So, and then the last item is from the auditor's office. They processed claims for about $4.5 million, including salary and benefits. Any items have questions about? Good morning.
Commissioners, items 1 and 2.
Green button, green light.
Green light. Green light, thank you.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, I presume those, holy smokes, I presume those funds are to supplement the planning and engineering staff for services for the year? Do they
They-
work
th-
for, with, how does that coordinate with county staff?
So rather than hiring qualified engineers and consultants with the specialties, we contract out with these two companies. Actually, there are a number of companies that we contract out with. So this is a multi-year contract.
The answer to you is that we don't have, and we shouldn't have on staff experts in every area of construction that we use, and these are the engineering services we use. Those two amounts are NTE. They're not to exceed, and they will choose one company and then another depending on the various expertises. I'm looking for Susan Eugenis to turn her microphone on and say, yes, that is correct.
Yes,
Well,
these.
Let me carry my question a step further before you answer.
Okay.
Is that when you talk about specialties and services, when I walk in with submitting for a building and planning permit, a building permit with a licensed engineering drawings, and your staff apparently has enough technology and structural engineering to go ahead and mark those drawings up, almost everyone gets red marked. I believe that if I have a licensed engineer, I'm just talking about use of services. If I have a licensed engineer that does a plan for a building, a structure that has stamped that drawing, they have liability for that. Now you take and mark it on up and put some other things on it. You have actually put some, taken liability or responsibility from that licensed engineer. I'm just talking about utilization of services. When you're spending, I know the civil engineering, the roads, the access to safety, but I protest having my licensed drawings marked up and a waste of your time. Just a note. Utilization of services.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would like to have you elaborate on the notice from the FERC notice regarding the Yale International Paper Trail.
So as you may be aware, hydroelectric facilities require a federal license.
Right.
And because they significantly alter the natural flow of the river, obviously, that license carries with it strings. There are strings attached. Safety, regular maintenance, all those kinds of things. But they also insisted on a recreation plan. So while Cowlitz County operates a Parks and Recreation Department, the biggest Parks and Recreation Department in the county is operated by Pacific Corps. So they have these camps and trails all up and down the valley associated with the 3 dams. So this is one of those that was a requirement. They were supposed to build a trail on Clark County. They had trouble getting cooperation from the state Department of Natural Resources. And so they came up with an alternative, and it was the alternative that was accepted. There's a consulting committee, 2 or 3 consulting committees on all that kind of assist. They're part of the process and the licensing process to review it. Cowlitz County is part of the Recreation Review Committee. But again, this is a trail that was over on the Clark County side.
If it's Clark County side, what has it got to do with us? Just
Yeah,
because you're
well,
part of it.
that's why I said, I'm not quite sure why they sent us the postcard, other than because we're a member of that, one of the review committees, where we always get those notices, and we're just on that mailing list, so.
So is this something you have to approve then? Is that what?
We're on the correspondence, we just simply acknowledge that we've received the communications.
Okay.
That's all. Okay. Anyone else? Good morning.
Morning. The 2 engineering, consulting engineering contracts, why did they more than double from 200,000 to 500,000?
There has been an increase in the amount of building activity that's going on, and we have a subdivision that we're reviewing today. That is one example of the kinds of things those consultants are hired to review. We don't have them very often, and we've noticed an uptick. I was out on the other side of Beacon Hill yesterday and noticed the gargantuan new apartment complex that's gone in, probably about 1,000 apartments that are tucked in between the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the BPA power lines. Just sprung up in the last 6 months. So there's a lot of building that's going on, but land use development, around the county. So, we have, it's not to exceed, but we have to raise the exceeding part because we've already used up the earlier amounts.
The two companies already used up the $200,000.
Because it's on a project by project basis. So they send the bill and.
What are they charging per hour?
I don't have that detail. I'd have to look that up.
And there's that much activity that it took two contracts doubling to $500,000.
These contracts have been in effect since 2022, and they're extending the date out to 2024. It's, I sometimes explain these things because we have, if I look at it in banking terms, it's a line of credit. It doesn't mean they're going to spend 500,000. There's instances where we have contracts that it never gets to the top amount that gets spent. I've seen a few of those. They can spend up to 500,000, but it's a reimbursement on service used. So it's not to exceed 500,000. It doesn't mean it will go to 500,000. Likely, most times it's probably going to get close to that. But I think I'm kind of speaking for Susan a little bit, but I think they try and determine, look at the scope of work that's coming down the pike and try to give us a reasonable amount so they're not back here all the time.
So Susan Eugenish, please.
So these are actually for public works projects, not for building reviews. So we actually have 3 civil engineering firms that supplement our engineering staff. Last year we had several emergencies, and so we use these to supplement our staff. They are used on projects that are not our general expertise. So designing bridge abutments, things of that nature. Last year, as part of our process, we had to redo or update, bring to modern standards, the load ratings, which we brought forward 6 bridges, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, where we had to post bridges for load ratings. So a lot of their money in the past was used for the load ratings, which was in our original budget, but a lot of these were designing several walls for slides. They were not in our original plan. So these 2 consultants both are almost at their $200,000 limit, and I have several task orders that I need to get them to start working on so we can build some of these walls, some of our culvert replacements. I have a traffic study that I need to get done, which is not something our staff normally does. So that's what we use these engineers for.
What do they charge per hour?
I don't have that right in front of me. It varies between what engineering level you have. If you have one of their young engineers, it's about $100. If you've got one of the principal engineers, it can be over $200. So we tend to get the lower and the middle, and then you get a few hours from the guys who do the quality reviews and some project management.
Is it common for these project engineers to double their fee within a year?
This is based purely on task. So they give us a scope for each task we ask them to do. So we review each task as they come in. And if it's something that we think they're charging us too much, we can say, no, never mind, we're not going to do that task. So their rates do go up every year and they are audited by the state. So we use what the state approves, WashDOT approves as our rates for their overhead. And that is what their rates are based off of.
Are these contracts put out for bid?
Yes, we go out for an RFQ for these every 2 to 3 years, and we update who is on our roster.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning.
Morning.
I was just curious about going back to the letter. Who wrote the letter?
If we could hold that off until it
Yeah,
appears.
that's going to be, that's the item, the motion item today.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get a copy of the agenda. Thank you.
Anyone else? Checking to see. Okay, we don't have any other
No, we're
hands up.
good.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I would move to approve the consent agenda as discussed, along with the vouchers and warrants in the amount of $4,500,114.22.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 That motion carries. That brings us to our next item from this office, the edited letter to Cynthia Brown regarding the abandonment exemption. Commissioner Mortensen?
Yeah, as has been mentioned, certainly was mentioned at the last Tuesday meeting and has been mentioned earlier today, that letter needs a retraction of some kind. I don't know how to retract that, so I crafted up a response that basically says we accidentally sent out a draft of a letter that I've cleaned up, and here it is. This is the real letter. And as a policy, anything that involves a commitment that we make for you, better have an opportunity to be aired by you. And so that is the intent of the letter here. Maybe Kelly can put the letter up. It's brief enough that it has been reviewed by legal, and this is our opportunity here to comment on the whole thing and to allow us to continue with this. This has not been sent out. While Kelly is looking at things, we are still playing around with KLTV and the cameras, and we had some issues last week. Currently, we're resolving them by going back to how we've been operating. Hopefully, the audio will go through this time. Pretty sure it will. In the meantime, maybe we start to comment on the letter.
Yes,
Sure.
well, first, Dennis, I appreciate your apology. Most certainly at a minimum, that was after all the discussion, it was last week.
Yeah.
And there was quite a bit of concern about it. an apology was probably a good starting point. I guess I want to start with, you've been in public office for how many years? 45?
Off and on,
Pardon me?
off and on, yeah.
Off and on. It must be at a minimum pretty embarrassing for something like that to have gotten past you. But I would like to discuss some of the things that are in that letter. Indicate that, like you said, that the acquisition of funds had been acquired, but more important to me is what's the actual liability that indicates in that letter? What liability was the county or would the county take on for that section of trail? Because that just reading that indicates that we would have the responsibility for the trestle crossing the river, the gas line. Is that removal of the tracks and the ties and stuff and creating what kind of a multi-use trail? Non-motorized? Motorized? Camping?
That issue has been discussed on and off in varied ways. At the moment, probably more important to the point is probably the process by which a letter was sent that should not have been sent, with assumptions that were in there that were certainly known and incorrect to the chairman. So I think, apology aside, there was a serious trust and process issue in there. So I can't answer you about the trail specifically because I do think that most people's notion of trails is not so useful. I just sent an article out yesterday to the board about the problems about rails to trails that other people have experienced. The idea that if we get that, yes, we assume liability for anything and everything. And there are lawsuits about that was my backyard. This was land that was taken from us by the railroad, by eminent domain, and now we want it back and you're getting in the way. It just goes on and on and on. Public safety is important. Nobody wants a trail in their backyard. And this is through backyards of Longview.
Well, I guess part of my point is the fact that if you don't even know what all the liabilities are, what all the expenses are, how did that get past you?
So again, the intent of the letter was to simply ask for a continuation of our opportunity to negotiate.
It says a lot more than that, Dennis.
Well, and yeah, but not this letter. This is the letter.
I've got the revised letter. I've read it. And I see most of that is X'd out.
That's right.
Okay. On the original letter, your signature is the third page is, okay.
And my mistake. Yep.
Especially as the chairman, your responsibility on anything that you put your signature to would, and bypassing your fellow commissioners, but even worse, bypassing the citizens of the county. I'm having a real bad problem with this.
I hear you. Yeah. I don't know what else I can say.
Well, I guess I don't know if you've ever done this before. I don't know. I shudder to think what the possible liability could be. The letter's already gone out, correct? The
Well,
original one is already gone
I understand it was
to all the parties.
emailed. Yeah.
Okay. So
It's also incomplete. You saw that question about more information.
yes,
That was the part that we didn't supply any answers to. So they see it's an incomplete letter. So
parts of it are incomplete, but it also indicates that funding is complete. It also indicates that liability is being accepted. Those two things are not in question in that letter. Would you agree with that?
yes. We haven't made those decisions yet.
a letter indication made those decisions. Okay.
Again, Dennis, thank you for your apology. I really appreciate that. But I'm a very anxious person. And I need to have some questions answered. And one of them is this the only letter that had not been discussed with your fellow commissioners that you've signed off on? I know you're the chairman, but is this the procedure that you make the decisions and then you sign off? Because if that's the case, I think the process is faulted. We need, and I know there's many issues and many letters, and it's very difficult to get a hold of the other two on all of them. But as a citizen, I really think that it's more appropriate to discuss anything that you've signed and sent off to be discussed with the other commissioners first before it's sent out. That's just my own paranoid personality showing, but I need to know if that's a process that's normal, that you would go ahead and sign before talking to them.
So my thought process was that this was consistent with the conversations we'd had. This is the 4th or 5th extension that we've asked for, and I don't think we brought all the extensions to the full board. It's kind of ministerial. Again, it ended up, it was my error. It was more details in it than we intended, because we haven't had the full public hearing, because it's taken so long to get to the point where they're ready to give it to us, which, as you can imagine, raises some questions. Why do they want to just give it to us? What's wrong? And so we got to make sure we review that. So
I understand, and thank you for that. And thank you for explaining. I just need to have you assure me that in the future, all things that are signed by you as chairman has been discussed with the other two members first. Thank you.
I really don't have anything in addition to say, but I feel like I appreciate your apology, but I feel like I just need to add my voice for other concerned citizens that may feel the same way as I do. There's not just one or two of us, but that there's many of us. To me, I feel like I feel like it's, oops, my bad. And I feel like it's a real breach of transparency and a breach of trust. And it makes me wonder, I feel like there's a lot of trust that has to be brought back, because I'm wondering, gee, we could be on the hook for so much money as taxpayers. And I do not understand all the fine print or anything else, but what I do understand is it's a really bad oops, and it really undermines my personal trust.
thank you.
Well, and I just want to share my thought on this too, is that it seems like this might be something that would come to the Board of Health. I'm new at the Board of Health, but because there is a fair amount of safety and health involved in this issue. That was just my thought.
So we are where we are. Can you kind of highlight where we go from here on this discussion? This rail line goes through the city of Longview, the city of Kelso. Economic Development Council has their fingers in it. And of course, Weyerhaeuser Company and the natural gas pipeline. There's a lot of individuals in this. Where does this go from here?
So negotiations have not been completed with Patriot Rail. So without, the next step is to complete the negotiations. Completing the negotiations is a little bit different than accepting or agreeing, because we've got a lot of work left to do to address those questions. what kind of liability, what kind of protections, we've got a lot of questions that are coming along. But because it's taken so long even to get to the point where they want to gift it to us, we haven't gone to staff yet. So we're a long ways away from, I think, in terms of whether we go forward with accepting it.
Okay, so it's interesting. You mentioned negotiations with Patriot Rail. Well, that could be a gifted situation that they gifted or whatever their ownership is of a right of way for that. But there's also hard assets on that. There's the bridge, as we know, there's the natural gas pipeline. Patriot Rail has agreements with Weyerhaeuser and others. So there's a whale of a lot of negotiations to go on that we hope, you'll make public hearings, and all of us public have a lot of insights into that. Everyone that has an access across that rail line has a dedicated interest that they had to negotiate in the past with Patriot or Weyerhaeuser or others. So practically everybody in this community has a vested interest in this discussion. Thank you.
So we all make mistakes sometimes, and I'm kind of curious at what point you may have realized that you had made a mistake in signing this paper. As the process goes, you got this letter in front of you and you're thinking, this is another thing. I'll just sign it. And then it goes on and you say, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Is that how it went? Or
So when you'll recall, I was at Mount St. Helens workshop last week. So when I was done with that workshop and noticed, following up on the meeting, and realized there was a problem with I said, wait a minute, what did happen? So we got a copy of the other letter, and sure enough, that was.
So was it something that you realized it and thought, better make an apology, or somebody else caught it and then you made the apology? When did you know it? And how does that go again? What did you know and when did you know it?
I think we got a letter. I mean, we brought the letter up when I got back in on Thursday. And I think by that time, Arn had already redrafted the letter. So I saw those at the same time.
Because I'm
I
just
said,
kind of
"Oh,
curious
man,
about,
that was bad."
or did you apologize because you felt bad, or did you apologize because you got caught? Kind of my question there. I don't expect a real answer.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Mortensen for bringing this letter to the public's attention. The county commissioner website has just been updated, and I take affront to county employees that say it's my equipment that's my computer that's the problem. I'll give you an example. I have a record from the county Superior Court on a software system called The Record. I had it checked out by a computer engineer, and I had it checked out by a classmate of mine that works for Intel that makes the chip. So to say it's my equipment, I really take affront to that. I'll give you an example. Here's your letter on the original county website software. It's legible to the human eye. You don't even need glasses. This is Mr. Mortensen's redacted letter. You would need a pair of good glasses on your new system and this is concrete evidence that all three of your commissioners can see, was printed on my equipment. So is this on your old system, which I've been using since 2009. Now your new system prints your agenda and all attached exhibits like this. So I really take affront when, oh, it's your equipment. Well, that's the oldest Dodge in the book. And I've given you an example of county records and flash drives and CDs that don't work. But reading Mr. Mortensen's redacted letter, you really ought to work for one of our national intelligence agencies with all the items that you redacted, which is your prerogative. You're a county commissioner, as are Mr. Weber and Mr. Dahl. One thing that you left in the letter, which gives me concern, is the current use of the railroad right-of-way with the tracks. It says in here you can use them as a trail, walking the tracks. I don't know if you've ever done it. It's not that easy. It's dangerous with the ballast. Just to use it as is right now. Now, if you want to talk liability, suppose people start using that and then they fall down and the rail is still there. That's quite a big liability, isn't it? When you're causing injury to the public. And what concerned me in the original letter, I kept seeing these docket numbers, CFR 49, which is the Code of Federal Regulation for the U.S. Department of Transportation. They've already been having hearings on this back in Washington, have they not? If these CFR footnotes are correct, they've already been having hearings. Is that correct?
Not with us, but they have to make it, they have to issue the exemptions. So they've been reviewing it. And the Patriot Rail made original application for abandonment with them. And that's what triggered the beginning of the review. And they said, here are the things that you have to do, including giving local governments the opportunity to negotiate.
But when you see the docket numbers, doesn't that indicate a hearing to you?
Well, that's when they would have made those decisions, sure.
And now this letter has been included in the dockets for the abandonment of this right-of-way rail. So now Cowlitz County has been included in these hearings by this letter, which is quite serious, because there's obviously a board back there that's hearing this. So now you've involved the county. That's the liability, is it not?
No,
I'm not,
I didn't peruse the specific details of that. And in fact, but the main point, all the intent of the letter was to extend the time window. And it doesn't commit the county to anything other than the extension. And there are no strings attached to that particular extension. If you think that us showing interest makes us owner of the track right now and somebody stubs their toe, we have liability. I don't think that's true.
No, it's not. And when I always hated footnotes when I had to write a report. But when I see these footnotes with docket numbers, I get concerned. That's all I have.
So curiously, I'm actually bothered probably more about the original letter than the rest of you seem to be. because in the chairman's own words earlier today, the consent agenda has basic routine matters. And that the charter of the commissioners is to protect the public interest. If the chairman were 25 years old, you might say, okay, yeah, I understand that he probably didn't fully appreciate what he was done. I don't think that's the case here after so much seniority. The board should work as a team and not as an independent entity. We have 3 commissioners because we don't want to create the tyrant that we see in the house up in Olympia. So the board is to act as a committee in the best interests of the county. This is not the first time that we have seen kind of this independent action. I don't typically pursue things too much. This one was really egregious. To be put on the consent agenda for something like that is unbelievable to me. To get the letter not sent out from the board, but sent out from another office, the COG is a problem. Every letter that goes out that has certainly my name in the upper right-hand corner, I want to go through the clerk of the board, not through some other entity. Recently, I got communication from a citizen, and he from Pacific Fiber, and he's talking about letters and commitments. There's a letter that was from October 7th of 2014 that presumably was promised to him that never was done. And it was promised to him by the chairman. Frankly, I have the copy. It's on the letterhead and all that, but I can't find it any place in the archives here. So that's a bit strange. Anything that gets printed on our header, it looks official, should have a trace on it. The activity of acting independently is one that is really bothersome because the chairman goes around as a job, goes around to other entities in the county and in the state and in the nation and says, I represent the citizens. You've got to have someone who does represent the citizens and not represent personal ambitions. Another example of an ambition is making promises that cannot be held or supported. That is to say, I can't go up there and say, I'm a county commissioner and I promise you I'm going to get this for you. People do that in the campaign trail. I never do that on any trail at all, trails or not. The Mount St. Helens is an institute. The Mount St. Helens Institute is something the chairman is very fond of. And he has been trying to get $500,000 for the institute for quite some time. And both Joe Gardner and also John J. Bush and I said no on those occasions. And subsequent to that, I hear from our Director of Public Services, essentially that the chairman had personally gone to ask him if couldn't he cough up another $500,000 to give to the Mount St. Helens Institute. I mean, we really can't have that kind of discussion. Everything's explainable. I can tell you that I apologize and all that, but once this trust has been broken, I think we have a serious problem. If you don't, well, then status quo will continue.
Good morning.
Morning.
I appreciate your apology. However, it's like putting a Band-Aid on. This is the second time that something like this has happened. I'm thinking of a certain letter that was sent to city council. And haven't heard anything about that. Haven't heard anything back about, has it been, brought back? Has it been reworded? And then this has gone out, and man, I voted for you. You're my commissioner of my area. This looks sneaky. And you're the chairman. So I'm looking at you as a constituent. And I'm also going to have a talk with you. We're going to pull up our big boy pants. And we're going to behave. No more of this sneaky stuff. This is not okay. You are a grown up. There's lack of transparency. The trust is out the window. And quite frankly, it hurts. I like you, Dennis. I know you don't like me, but I like you. I just, no more of this sneaky business. You guys are a team. There's 3 of you for a reason. There's 3 commissioners because we have a big county. There's 3 of you for a reason, and no more of that. It's ridiculous. Please be the person that I was expecting you to be when I voted for you. Can you do that?
Yes.
I'm going to hold you to it. Because I'm going to be either on there or right here. Okay.
Well, I knew about the Cowlitz County or Cowlitz Railroad situation because I got the letter here in my pocket. I didn't know about what Arden just mentioned. But Dennis, you've let our county down. You've let the citizens of this county down. I believe it's time for you just plain to resign. You've failed our trust several times. Like I say, I just knew about the one. But when Arden brings up the situation with Mount St. Helens and a couple others that you went on your own and ignored the other 2 people that are on our commissioners and signed letters, and especially the letter that went back to Washington, and they're negotiating on that right now with Cowlitz County's name on it. The liability of that railroad would break this county, absolutely break it. And besides that, you guys talk about one bridge. There's about 3 or maybe 4 bridges that you would be taking liability over, because you got the bridge that goes over Ostrander Road, got the bridge that goes over Ostrander Creek, and just the main bridge that goes over the Cowlitz River. I mean, my God, that'd be enough to break the county. I think it's time for you to resign, Dennis. As far as I'm concerned, you're done. You don't deserve the position, period.
Anyone else? We have a motion before, or we don't have a motion yet, but we have a proposal to sign the edited letter.
I'd like to add a comment or discussion. Are you willing to step down as chairman at this point?
I serve at your pleasure, so Yeah, if you want me to step down, I will, of course.
Mr. Dahl, any comments?
I'd like to make one other comment and tell you, some of you know that I was a PUD commissioner 40 years ago when I was 28 years old. And during that time, I know a public official who got stopped by the local law enforcement driving drunk. And he pulled out a card from his pocket and said, "Look, I'm an elected official. You can't arrest me." Which he ended up in jail because he was very drunk. But the problem, I guess the point I'm making is occasionally people get it into their head that that position of authority gives them rights or privileges that they don't have. And I don't know that stepping down as chairman would fix the problem if just because you've been there for so long that you feel that you have certain rights and privileges that you really don't have. I guess as a first step, I would request that you step down as chairman. And if you're not willing to do that, I would ask your fellow commissioners to do that for you.
As I sit here listening to what's going on and thinking, okay, with a politician that is not doing what's right, that they move forward on their own and kind of almost looking for their own grandizement or their own ways to say, to enrich themselves. I don't know what the bottom line is to that, but it comes down to trust. Hey, if I can't trust somebody, how do I know the next time something big comes up or the next time something comes to the county? How do we know we can trust you? And that becomes a real problem for the public too. That, hey, there's a problem with this guy, and just looking at something and signing off on it and thinking, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Well, it put our county into a serious predicament in the sense of, hey, what's going to happen next time? And that's my big concern. So it's something that, yeah, in serving the public, if there's that trust lost or totally wiped away, yeah, that's not going to work for me. And I cannot support or sustain somebody in their decision thinking, well, is he right this time or is he trying to do something under the table or something kind of shady or what's going on? And that's where I'm coming from.
Excuse me, I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing an example of government being held accountable. If you go back a couple of years ago, I believe, unless it was something really controversial, this room was basically empty. And probably things kind of went this way with nobody challenging things. Well, now look at the room, see how many people are here. That a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, they said, well, I can't do anything. It's totally beyond my control. Well, here we have a room of partially full of citizens that are here often enough to really understand the big picture of what's going on. So my hat is off to all the people that have come in here and started to uncover some of the things that need to be fixed. And that only not applies to here, but to city councils, school boards. We need more and more people to stand up and actually come to these events and hold people accountable.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we call a new election of chairman of the board. Given the time, we could do that next Tuesday.
Why not right now?
It's up to you, I think. It's up to the two of you. Remember, we're not into unilateral stuff here.
Well, we actually have a 10 o'clock meeting. It's now 10
Yeah.
o'clock. So we'll put the matter to the side and unless you prefer differently.
Well, you do have a motion on the floor right now, so we should
I
deal
don't
with
think
that.
did we make, I don't, did we make?
I said I moved that we call new election,
Oh.
election for a new chairman of the board.
Okay,
And,
so the motion before us is to elect a new chairman of the board at next Tuesday's meeting.
next Tuesday's meeting would be fine.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion carries. We'll have that set for beginning of the meeting next week. That brings us to the timed public hearing.
In just a moment also, we will come back because we still have a motion item that we have to go through. For the letter.
Is there an estimate on this time public hearing? Are we able to be present, or as I understand, we have to pay? We have to pay.
No, I mean, you can stay here. It's not, we're not emptying the room. It's just that the participants have to be on the record. So,
Understanding.
so it is 10 o'clock. And well, I would need to have staff come forward and make the presentation.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Daniel Turner. I'm a senior planner with the Cowlitz Building and Planning Department. And I do have a presentation for you regarding the Silver Lake Village 3 urban subdivision. Okay. So this is for the urban subdivision at Silver Lake Village Phase 3, subdivision case number 2270-01. So Silver Lake Village Phase 3 is an urban subdivision proposing to create 26 residential lots on 11.75 acres of land. The location of the subdivision is at 400 Hall Road in Silver Lake. The owner is Bradley Thomas, with Nick Little being the applicant. So the case before you is a closed record public hearing with two objectives. The first objective is to determine the purpose of the determine if the proposed urban subdivision conforms with the Cowlitz County Code and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the second objective is to inquire the public use and interest proposed by the urban subdivision. So the location of the property is at 400 Hall Road, Silver Lake, which is approximately 6.5 miles northeast of the city of Castle Rock. Land uses adjacent to the subject site include to the south vacant land and urban subdivision, single-family residences. To the north, urban single-family residence of Silver Lake Village Phase 1 and 2. To the west, Hall Road and urban single-family residences, and then to the east is forest land.
Just a quick question, the picture there is as of what date?
I'm sorry?
What's the date on the slide? When that was drawn?
The date on this map?
Yeah, you're showing me a picture of the area and it's got the build outs, but I'm wondering whether that whole area is undeveloped or there's some development there. No, is this a contemporary picture?
Sorry,
I don't know how to ask it any differently. Oh, here comes Pat Harbison.
Patrick Harbison, Public Works. The aerial's about 2020. What you're seeing is phase 1 is fully constructed. Phase 2 has been preliminarily approved with construction approval, but they have not started yet.
Thank you.
And phase 2 was approved in 2021. All right, so this is the proposed preliminary plat. The proposed 26 lots are located on the east side of the property. And the west side of the property contains a Class 3 wetlands, approximately 10 acres in size, including areas of the wetlands outside of the subject property. Lots will be accessed by extensions of Rainer Way and Deer Fern Way, with exterior access aligned with Stout Road. The subdivision will utilize public water and sewer. Stormwater management includes the utilization of facilities to be located in phase 2 and new facilities, including inlets and biofiltration swells for treatment. And then, so this is a picture of what this phase intends to look like. This is a picture from Silver Lake Phase 3. I'm sorry, Silver Lake Phase 1, which is currently constructed, and this is looking along Zephyr Drive.
So the date of this picture?
That picture was taken in 2020, because this picture was used for the presentation for Silver Lake Phase 2 in 21.
Okay, and at what stage is this in phase 1? Is this?
This is this stage. Phase 1 would be fully built. This is after houses have been permitted and certificates of occupancy have been issued and people moved in.
I just need to be sure. This is the date when this picture was taken was again 2020, 2021?
Around 2020, yes.
Okay, and so the place was built out in how much time? So the permit was issued for phase 1, construction began. This looks like it's an established area.
I believe phase 1 was
18.
much earlier. And they had a number of extensions on their preliminary plat. I don't know. I don't have the information of exactly when phase 1 was completed.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm asking is that a big issue for me is always going to be the infrastructure and the traffic. So if we are issuing a permit today for something that will be built 20 years from now, I give you a different answer than if it were built next week.
Yeah.
So Silver Lake Village Phase 1 is completely built out. It's been in place for about 2 to 3 years, and it's 100% occupied, if I'm not mistaken. So all the the traffic studies, and we'll get into that as we get in, have taken it into account as it's already there.
Okay, thank you.
Go back one slide, that overview, just so I can get my bearings. No, that.
You
that-
want the map, right?
That map,
Next,
you know, that was above, and look,
the aerial picture,
aerial picture. That one.
number 8.
Yeah. So phase 2 there's already been approved, okay. And how many houses in phase 2?
I believe 16.
16? And then 3, okay, thanks.
All right, so the subject property is unzoned with a comprehensive plan designation of urban. The urban area is intended to provide efficient land use in areas where public services are either currently available or planned. The urban area contains existing dense industrial, commercial, and residential development and is intended to allow for further growth. SEPA, a determination of non-significance, was issued on October 12th, 2022. And the SEPA comment period ended October 28th, 2022. During that process, we found that SEPA compliance has been achieved.
Would you repeat that last statement? SEPA compliance is an issue? Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
A class 3 wetlands is located on site. The applicant has provided a critical areas report discussing the impacts to the wetlands. This discussion included alternate options for creating a looped road back out to Hall Road. However, the county required the loop road to align with Stout Road. Now, the proposed impacts to the wetland are approximately half an acre. Mitigation for the impacts include a 4-to-1 on-site wetland enhancement and purchase of credits from the Cowlitz River Wetland Conservation Bank.
Quick question, could you just give us a sentence on wetland 3, 2, and 1? So the public and we know exactly what the definition of a wetland is, what the wetland categories are.
Different categories in wetlands include 1, 2, 3, and 4. I believe they are in order the wetlands with the most habitat functions are going to be your class 1s. Class 2s are your next level of habitability, and then you have your class 3 and then your class 4s.
So in class 3, I'm not likely to find a spotted owl, but in class 1, I might. Okay.
Yes.
X.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. The applicant is requesting a waiver to the minimum side yard setback standards. The applicant is requesting a 5-foot reduction to the side yard setbacks for residential lots due to the extent of the wetlands and wetland buffers occupying a large extent of the land area on the subject property. These typical building envelopes were included in the preliminary plat. Staff has found that the proposed setback reductions meet the criteria to consider a waiver. It is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, including phase 1 and phase 2 of the previous phases, and it does not nullify the spirit of the comprehensive plan.
So when you say consistent, do the other two units have 5-foot setbacks?
Yes. Phase one required a waiver to the front yard setback. However, the time between phase one and phase two, our standards changed. So they no longer need a variance to the front yard setback to maintain the same standard as phase one.
Thank you.
So the subdivision can meet all the urban subdivision requirements and land use standards. The waiver will permit a 5-foot reduction in the side yard setbacks. Both the proposed subdivision and the waiver request would be consistent with the Cowlitz County Comprehensive Plan. So staff has recommended approval of the subdivision and waiver as presented. The Planning Commission voted 5-1 to recommend approval of the subdivision and waiver at the February 15th Planning Commission regular meeting. And that concludes the staff presentation. The applicant is available for questioning, and I'm also available if there are additional questions.
A question on the 5-1 vote. Who was the outstanding vote? I don't need a name. I need to know what they represented on the board.
That was Commissioner Peters. Was the no vote.
Again, please.
Without speaking for Commissioner Peters, if I recall correctly, his concern was the public's concern with the wetland.
And he doesn't represent the District 3 in any specific way.
I don't think so.
And the strategies for mitigating the wetlands is according to policy, what is allowable and meets their rules. A portion of that is money being put into a wetland bank operated by the city council. That was part of it. And the other one is just the set aside.
Yes.
On site.
Yes. So the purchase of credits is in our critical areas ordinance, we have a priority of addressing development within critical areas. First one is always going to be avoidance. Second is appropriate mitigation and restoration. And I guess the last one would be the purchase of credits. Purchase of credits in this case is derived from the road itself to the extension of, I believe it's going to be called Stout Road to Hall Road. The county required them to align with Stout Road, the existing intersection, instead of putting that road somewhere else.
And that takes it through the wetlands.
And that is a driving factor of it, yes.
So we have 10 acres of wetlands up there and we're going to put a road through it. And the way we mitigate that is we can pay money and it's okay.
So only for a portion of that, they are doing a 4-to-1 mitigation ratio on site.
So how does paying money make this 10 acres whole? I don't get it. You're filling in. You're gonna fill in, you're gonna take out part of that wetland. It's 10 acres. It's been there for a long time. You're gonna put a road through there, which is gonna have runoff and different stuff into the wetland. But it's okay because we're paying money to send it someplace else.
That is the purpose of the mitigation bank. Yes, is to offset impacts
You can be carbon neutral by paying money and your company is all of a sudden carbon neutral. It drives me crazy that we can just charge. It's just a way to take money, but you're not making this wetland whole, are you?
Mr. Cowlitz, you're spot on, but it's a taking either way. Either I'm going to take your property or I'll take your money. Yeah.
I get it, but it's a scheme, so tell me that you can apply money someplace else and it makes it all right on Hall Road or wherever it is, it doesn't matter, I find disgusting, actually. If we're talking about a small little thing, probably so, but we're talking about 10 acres here. And why do we have, and you can't build this without putting a road through this wetland? Is that what I'm hearing?
So 10 acres is the total size of the wetlands.
I get that.
The impact is going to be 20,000 square feet approximately.
Yeah, and you can't build this without running through this wetlands. That's what I'm hearing.
The wetland, yeah, it's something that's not avoidable to align to Stout Road. You have to put this road through the wetland.
It can't go out to the existing road?
Can we go back to the map?
And so the developer, believe me, does not want to build this. It is Public Works asking for this for safety and circulation purposes. Phase 2 was limited to 16 lots to allow 50 homes that would come out on Zephyr. Once you get over 50 homes, you need a secondary access to get in and out safely for both fire and everything else.
You know, and then what you end up with is over time, you end up drive through Lexington. You got road after road after road after road that comes out onto the highway. And then it creates all kinds of problems.
Well, and I would counter that the problem with Lexington is that they didn't require the secondary accesses behind. You can't go north-south except for West Side Highway. And that's what this secondary access would allow that to get your secondary access into it without coming out on one particular spot.
And we're saying it's a safety issue if we don't have this. You can't get vehicles in there. That's what I'm hearing.
If Zephyr's blocked, you would block a bunch of houses from a accident or a fire or anything like that, yes.
Go ahead.
I don't know if they have people here to talk, but
Are you done with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
I think, Mr. Chairman, you asked to have the map back up there. Perhaps we could see that again.
Yeah, can we go ahead and get that?
Where's when you fill a wetland, you know, this thing retains water. Where's you're filling, looks like, I don't know, 20,000 feet or whatever you're filling it at. Where's that water go? It doesn't stop raining. It doesn't stop draining. So where's it go?
So the wetland is an extension of Silver Lake. So as the lake rises and falls, the water inside it rises and falls. And the road will have culverts crossing it to connect both the north and south side of the wetland.
Yeah, but you have some fill in there. So is it going to encroach on neighbors' property?
No,
How do we know that?
the fill,
As the water rises and falls, because you've taken some volume out of this wetlands, is it going to encroach on a neighbor's property?
no, Silver Lake is regulated by the regulating structure, so it doesn't rise or fall any more than it would today. The dam sets the level of Silver Lake.
But water sits in this 10 acres.
Correct, but it's hydraulically connected to Silver Lake. So the surface elevation of the water is the same as surface elevation of the lake, which is set by the dam and the weir.
Okay.
So,
But you're still taking out some holding capacity. So if the Silver Lake is up and the same amount of water is running back to this wetlands area, it doesn't have the same amount of area to fill in. So it has to fill higher somewhere.
So I think he's saying it spills over the dam and it goes that downstream from the dam.
Okay.
So a question, this I could probably use a slightly different map. So, where is the road in the flipped image of Nebraska here?
So Stout is on the top red line, Stout is the cul-de-sac that comes off of, Hall Road.
Okay,
And
now,
so we're aligning with that.
okay. And, that looks like a lot of housing for Hall Road. I haven't been up there. Is that adequate to handle all of this stuff plus more?
We believe it is, yes.
I beg pardon?
We professionally believe it is, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch. We professionally did what?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Oh, okay.
SCJ Engineering did the study on that. What other stuff have they done? I mean, is that, who pays for SCJ? I mean, who are they working for?
All studies that are done for development are paid for by the developer and reviewed by county staff.
Okay, so they get their money from the developer on these reports. How many different, what other stuff has SCJ done? Do you know?
I can't name off the top of my head, but over the years I have worked with them on multiple developments.
Yeah, are there any places that do it for residents too?
SCJ would be happy to work for anybody who would ask for a traffic study for them, yes.
Mm-hmm. But they work for the developer.
This one works for the developer.
Yeah.
And who did they do the traffic study for the Lexington apartments?
I don't think so. I could be wrong on that. I'd have to look in that
Okay.
file.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here, I look at that and it certainly looks like to me that somebody would have to explain to me why traffic isn't a problem. After the Lexington approval one, I was looking at that and some issues came up, among others, some I was going to bring up, like I won't digress on that one, but the traffic study that was used for the decision seemed to be flimsy at best. It was old data plus I'm not sure it had in there factored in that the average traffic doesn't mean a whole bunch if at 8 a.m. you're all trying to make a left turn onto Ocean Beach Highway, let's say, or, some such thing. And so I'm wondering what situation we have here.
So, and that's a very good question because, so we ran into an issue during COVID where we couldn't allow traffic counts to be done between 2020 or 2019 or to 21, give or take, because the traffic counts would be so low that everything would pass no matter what. And so the traffic study started taking the last counts done in the area and applying what we were calling COVID factors on them to try to bring them up to what real standards are nowadays. And so when this development came in, it was prior to the traffic for COVID ramping up. And so that's why we were still using 2018 numbers, because that was the last traffic study done before COVID.
Okay, and what was the condition of the first phase at that point in time? It was
2018, I believe the counts were done for Silver Lake Village Phase 1.
right, but did the 2018 counts?
They would not have, because they were actually they were taken to calculate the traffic study for it, so no.
Okay, when was the first occupancy on stage one or phase one?
Say that again.
What year was the occupancy on the first phase?
Occupancy, no, because phase one was way earlier. We can ask the developer that. He'll have that knowledge right off the top of his head when they actually started building houses.
Okay.
I apologize.
And if I go to the north here, eventually I come out onto 504.
Correct.
And what's that intersection like?
What's that intersection like?
Yeah, is it traffic controlled?
It's a stop sign on Hall through traffic on Spirit Lake Highway.
Okay.
So at what point as this Hall Road is developed? And it's getting pretty developed. There's not too many more spaces to go left. When would you recommend more controlled intersection? Of course, that's a state highway, so that is up to WashDOT, but they would certainly listen to our recommendations if the need is there.
So county standards are, we go by level of service. And so if we took out the state portion of that, any intersection, if it gets below a level of service of D, so basically an LOS of F or worse, some improvement needs to be done to increase that level of service. And level of service is basically how long a car has to wait to do their turning movement.
I mean, are you anticipating with one more development that the congestion will be enough that we need a little more of an adjustment, or it's not going to happen?
The state does a lot different analysis on it, and I can't answer that question of how they would determine that a signal would be necessary in this location.
And in the review, did the state patrol express any concerns about the level of congestion?
They did not.
Along those questions, we've had a lot of discussion here about the notification. And because this is a closed hearing, I looked quickly at the list, and there are only 4 or 5 people that made a comment that can make a comment here. I've gotten a couple of emails, and I'd have to check the dates to see if that's post-SEPA report or not. And I'm wondering how well known this effort was for all this, pardon me, the stakeholders around.
You want to speak 30 minutes?
So the first public notification for this project is going to be with our SEPA notification. We send postcards to all property owners within 300 feet.
Right. I think we basically know that you followed the pattern or the procedure you've done before.
Yes.
Okay. On this map, if I were at the southernmost point on the map, would I have received a notice?
No, some of the houses on the western side probably would have, but there's a big chunk of land between the subject property and the northernmost houses on, I can't read the name of the street.
Okay, so on this map, egress is only to the north?
Yes.
See, to me, that's incomplete notification.
From a posting standpoint, there was an 11/17 orange posting along Hall Road. That they're working on altering that, but
right,
you would need to stop to read, but it was there.
Couple, let's talk water and sewer, because I know the water is a line that comes up from Castle Rock.
Correct.
How do we determine that, or do we determine it later? And how do we determine that it's gonna be able to supply the pressure and stuff? Cause I know going out the other way to Castle Rock, they're talking about a pump station because of weak pressure. So when does the drain get to a point where there needs to be other stuff there? How do we arrive at that? And what does it cost the people if that happens?
So each house will pay a system development charge, which goes into a fund that can only be used for capital improvements such as that if it needs to happen. It pays for reservoirs for the treatment plant, that type of stuff. In this case, the real limiting factor is the capacity of the treatment plant in Castle Rock and whether they can produce enough water fast enough to get there. They are still only about halfway through the capacity of that plant. So for a amount of water, we are good for quite a while. From a pressure standpoint, the line is a 12-inch line coming out that has massive capacity to serve quite a few more people than are currently on it. Elevation is where we start having some pressure concerns, and this elevation is low enough and sufficient that we are not concerned with pressure. The one near Chuck's is the highest point on the system. And so that's where we are having pressure concerns and putting in a booster pump to boost it up a little bit.
Okay, so we don't anticipate costs to other people that are already on
No.
water for this going in?
No.
Same question on sewer. How do we know when we're at? Because I know this is served by a private system.
So this is served by a system that we manage as well.
Mm-hmm.
A treatment plant down by the corner of Spirit Lake Highway and South Tootle Road. We watch that via the flows that are coming in. And we are about 60% capacity with that. We still have quite a few connections left. I'm going to say in the 300 to 400 left.
So once again, we don't expect that anything that happens with this is going to affect, it's going to cost people more that are already sitting there.
Right. The developer is responsible to install all on-site piping and to our standards, get it tested to our standards so that we're happy before we accept it, so that we know that it'll be a long time before we have to do any maintenance on it.
Any other questions of staff at this time?
The setbacks, you recommend approval of the setback. And tell me a little bit the rationale behind approving the setback. So that's the variation from 10 feet to 5 feet.
Yes. So there are limitations on how many lots can be developed on this piece of property with the presence of the wetlands. All of the residential lots will avoid the wetlands and buffers. So they are placed outside of all of that. In this area is unzoned with a comprehensive plan designation of urban. And because there is because of the unzoned classification, it carries with it a default 10-foot setback. In urban zone and suburban zone areas of the county, that setback is 5 feet. So if this piece of property does not enjoy the same setbacks as a property that would be zoned and have a comprehensive plan designation of urban. So that would be the kind of the technical aspect. The applicant has also stated that they want to produce single family or single story homes, very similar to what was done in phase 1. We also carry over the same justification for evaluating and improving the waiver, or evaluating and recommending approval of the waiver from the to kind of match the development standards through all phases, because we want to see the same standards through all phases. And then other concerns from that or requesting the 5-foot setback. I believe the applicant can answer as far as design of the home and what they intend to put in this area.
So how many homes with the 10-foot setback versus the 5-foot setback?
So the recommendation that we have would be, and one of the options that you have for this subdivision is we feel that the subdivision itself can meet all of the county requirements as far as development. That can be done absent of the waiver. So the waiver is doesn't have to be approved by this board. It is separate. It is almost a separate request. But they did meet all of the code requirements for evaluating a setback standard. So that was the basis for our recommendation. If you do approve the subdivision without the waiver, it would not reduce the amount of lots that the applicant can get out of the current layout.
Okay. In previous discussions with the planning board, there is a check the box approach, and but I will want something a little more. I know when I go into a neighborhood where the houses are very close to each other, it's a different feeling. It's a different neighborhood than one where the houses are further apart. How do you recommend the board look at something like that? I mean, I want the planning commission to tell me it is acceptable to the neighborhood to have packed housing, if I may use a pejorative term. And I suspect that's not the case here. But
I know that the record from the planning commission describes some of that very discussion. Residents, at least 2 residents on Zephyr, talked about the setbacks being just fine, and they hope the other divisions are the 5 feet distance, because it's a 10-foot break between homes, right? 5 on each side. So that meets the fire concerns for an urban setting. So, and the two folks, I don't know if they might be here, but they mentioned that worked just fine, and hoped all the other divisions units were 5 foot apart. Another question that I want to go back to that wetlands, and we talked about 10 acres of wetlands and a road going through it. How much of the 10 acres are you taking up with the land and the support and the drains and all that?
About 20,840 square feet.
Yeah, I don't do math very well. Is
That's
that,
like
is
half
that
an
an acre?
acre.
Is that 2 acres? Is that 4 acres?
that's a half acre.
It's about a half acre.
Half
yes.
acre, all right. Good. And so for that half acre, that's what's being mitigated with the bank.
Yes, so there's half an acre of impacts. And the mitigation would be split between onsite and credits purchase.
So the whole idea of a mitigation bank and protecting wetlands is kind of a dual responsibility with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Washington State Department of Ecology, neither one known for being lax on protecting wetlands. Have either one of them expressed any concerns about the use of the wetland bank or putting a road through the middle of the wetland?
Correct. I believe Ecology had commented on the SEPA But I believe they didn't raise any additional concerns or that our subsequent review met their concerns with the impacts of the wetlands.
The discussion with the planning commission had at least one person talk about, concerned about overcrowded schools. Did the school district raise an objection about, we just simply don't have room for any more kids?
The school districts are always included in our SEPA notifications, but we did not receive any comments.
So they did not object?
No.
So I want to give an opportunity for somebody from the developer and those who participated before to share their concerns. Again, I think, part of the challenge that we have as a board is that our discretion is kind of looking over, did the planning commission check the boxes? And I know that's an irritating phrase, but so that's why I'm asking these double follow-up questions to see if they followed the process, because otherwise we have to say, go back and look at this. We think you overlooked something. So at this time, we'll open the hearing. And again, it's for those who participated with the planning commission before. And so that hearing is now open. Come to the front table, and I think for the record, since we have to identify, if you're on the record, you need to tell us who you are. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nick Little, Chilton Development Services, representing the applicant, or I am the applicant, I guess, representing the landowner who is here today as well. Thanks for the opportunity to speak a little bit to the project. So I think first I just want to talk a little bit about some of the question and answer that was just happening. I think there's some additional information that can probably make this a little more clear for, good, bad, or indifferent. So the timing of the three phases of the subdivision. So phase one is probably the most complicated. It was originally approved in 1998. However, it did expire and was reapplied for in 2005. And it was used, a lot of the earlier documents were reused, but were upgraded to 2005 standards. So the first phase was designed to that standard. Typically, when you grant a subdivision approval, a long plat in this case, they're good for 5 years. And that's how long you have to build the subdivision, potential extensions, et cetera, and then be done with the project. This particular subdivision was set to expire, however, due to economic conditions. We recall the recession in 2008, 9, 10-ish. The state amended their subdivision regulations to allow for an extension, an automatic extension of approvals based on the time at which they were applied for. This was done because obviously when the market dumped, a bunch of people were left holding a lot of land and paper, and it was kind of an economic issue. So due to that change, that kicked out phase one. Instead of expiring in 2010, it was kicked out for up to 2016. I want to say. So phase one was constructed and then granted final approval by the board and the county in 2016 in accordance with those conditions on the 2005 approval. So it's kind of complicated because it started in the 90s, but it was designed, built, and constructed to at least 2005 standards. Phase two was granted, back one step. They started building homes in there in about 2017. And I want to say they were built out within a year or two. It wasn't too terribly long. So phase one, which you saw in that previous map, is fully constructed. And they were granted waivers to the front and side setbacks. As Mr. Turner pointed out, the front setbacks no longer needed. It was done primarily as single level homes. The idea being that it attracts a different clientele. It attracts a different size of family. You're not getting a 2-story, 5-bedroom, 3,000 square foot home. You're trying to hit a target market segment. And that was the goal. And it's relatively affordable. I think the idea of affordable housing is all over the board and what we want to call affordable. But new construction, home and lot for, you know, 350 to 500 is pretty reasonable, which is what the target was and has been since. So phase 2 was granted approval in 2021, has not been constructed. All the construction permits are in place. And then we moved into, for a number of economic reasons, phase 2 wasn't going to be feasible without phase 3. So the landowner moved ahead with phase 3, and that's when I kind of entered into this process with him. So phase 2 and phase 3 are both going, you know, ideally, assuming it would be approved, would be built to roughly the same standards, more or less current codes, which is a lot different than I think a lot of the other development that's occurred previously in the area. So that's just a little history, I guess. The rest of Hall Road developed starting in 1962 and continuing on, or excuse me, 1959, and then all the way up to 1975. You get the various plats that created that dense development down there to the south. The setback reduction was discussed, and it was actually one of the items that was discussed pretty significantly over the course of the planning commission hearings. So essentially, if I were to put it in a nutshell, they're looking to match the typical urban residential zoning that's found elsewhere in the county. This is an urban residentially comp planned area. It's been designated as urban or urban residential in some fashion in the comp plan since the 60s. The old 1976 plan had it. Obviously, whatever was in place prior to that allowed for it because you had the other developments, and then the new plan also followed along with that due to the presence of water sewer on Hall Road. The county also did some pretty serious upgrades to Hall Road. There's some pictures of it that were submitted with the application. Sidewalks, very wide road, meets urban standards all the way out to Spear Lake Highway. So the idea is, in order to put single level homes in this area, the setback reduction allows them to fit, you know, existing building plans onto that instead of having to go 2-story and potentially redesign, you know, home plans for the entirely new subdivision, maintains a sense of continuity, and then also hits that target audience again, or target buyer. So there's a lot, you know, that's just in a nutshell. When developed, it's going to have full fire hydrants through there. So fire isn't a concern in terms of fire flow or adequate fire coverage. So
Nick,
yes.
the plan is for interconnecting roads. So I know there's a road coming south from Zephyr, and I can't remember the name of it, Zephyr Court maybe.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's designed to go into unit 2, or unit 2. And then unit 3 goes up into unit 2 as well. So is there going to be a whole circular pattern?
Correct, yes. You'll be able to drive from phase 1 directly into phases 2 and 3 without going out to the road. The Public Works Department required the second access due to the number of homes in all 3 phases combined. So the landowner looked at every option in the book. Crossing a wetland is not anyone's ideal option. It's not fun to build. It's not fun to pay for. It's not fun to mitigate on-site, off-site mitigation banks, doesn't matter. That raises complexity, raises cost, raises time, all of things impact a project. He went so far as looking to purchase easement and purchase actual property from neighboring landowners to try to obtain a second access somewhere else. None of that was able to come to fruition. So Public Works, you know, you end up balancing 2 different things when you're talking about crossing a wetland, right? You're balancing safety, and then you're balancing impacts to the wetland. So avoidance wasn't necessarily an option, but we could reduce. So you'll actually see that the road section is reduced, I want to say 6 to 8 feet as it goes through the wetland. So we try to reduce that footprint as much as possible. The section where it actually connects, where we would cross to connect back to Stout Road, traffic safety dictated those be across from each other. Fortunately, that's also one of the narrower parts of the well. It's not the ultimate narrowest, but it's maybe 20 feet wider at that point. So that was about the best that we could hope for to try to minimize it. Mitigation on site is always preferred, generally, at least by the county, by the applicant. The concept of mitigation sequencing is unique to jurisdictions. So some jurisdictions will place wetland banking higher. We don't. It's kind of towards the middle bottom of the list. The problem is when you try to do an on-site enhancement, on-site mitigation, you have to have something to fix. And you don't have a lot of area in this project where we can go in there and mess around and do sufficient enhancement. We have enough to do a ratio of the indirect impacts and address what we can. So the only option available left is the mitigation banking. The concept of mitigation banking as a scheme is a great discussion point. I wouldn't say it is or isn't at this point. Unfortunately, it's the only option that is available. And the concept behind mitigation banking is that you're looking at a system as a whole instead of one particular on-site. So those mitigation banks go through a ridiculous amount of permitting and review. They take years to get set up through ecology, through Corps of Engineers, through local jurisdictions. And I believe it was the county processed, even assisted in processing some permits for this particular mitigation bank. Once they're established, they have an area of influence that during the creation of the bank, they've determined that this system, anything that happens in here, they can mitigate with this particular bank. So you take, and it's a mathematical equation at that point. It's a fact, you figure out how much area you're impacting, you apply the ratio, which isn't 1-to-1, it's offset. You actually offset more than you impact. And then the number of credits is purchased from the bank. So I don't think it was not desirable. It was definitely not desirable to want to put a road through wetland or have a second connection. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out which is the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. In this case, public safety ruled out over that. Really quick, the traffic counts, the traffic study. So there were some questions on how, AM, PM is what they term in the industry peak hour trips. And those are important. Those are the most important thing you actually look at. To generate those numbers, you look at the number of additional lots that goes to an big old thick engineering manual, and they come up with an estimated number of morning and evening trips. So in this case, let's see here, it was, I thought I had it on the right page. Pardon me, gentlemen. So with 26 units, AM peak hour trips are 22 additional trips in what they call the term of AM morning peak hours, and in the evening peak hours is 28 total trips, additional based off the 26 houses. The current level of service of that intersection is an A. It will continue to operate as an A in the morning and potentially slip to a B during the PM peak hour. So, and those are level service A is you're stopping for less than 10 seconds to make a turn, and level B is 10 to 15 seconds. So, considering the number of homes out there, that's not a large number of additional trips. And it doesn't appear to, according to the traffic engineering firm, does not change that level of service significantly. The notification for the project, the county handles the notification. I know that there was a lot of discussion on the project. It was well known in the area. We went through 5 workshops. There was a public meeting held at Toutle High School, which was attended by a member of the board. Whether or not that complies with RCWs for ex parte communication is irrelevant, I guess, at this juncture. But the area it was well known in the area this was happening. It was all over Facebook and everything else. And so, well, that's not county notification. For good or bad, it's out there. The public, I believe in the public process of people's ability. So there's nothing wrong with having additional people. I think that's the point of the public process, is to get additional input. And that's kind of answering some of those questions that I kind of heard. I thought maybe would clear it up a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of things to go into detail in the project. I don't want to waste the board's time. I could probably sit and wax philosophical on an hour on the technical documents and whatnot. Rather, I would just say I'm open to questions. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
You said, phase 2 isn't viable without phase 3. Why?
Cost. It's not cheap to build the subdivision. It's not cheap to get started. It's not cheap to put in the ground. So if you're going to go out there and do phase 2, ultimately subdivision comes down to a numbers game. More or less, we can talk about building communities, all those things and all those other things. Those are all important too. But in the end of the day, if something doesn't pencil out, you're not going to go forth and build it. The cost to develop phase 2 doesn't necessarily work without phase 3 attached to it. So when you see this application come through, this, at least for the developer, this is an all or nothing game here. He's going to either build phase 2 and phase 3 together, or likely neither phase. Phase 3 ends up.
Phase 2 was 16 homes, right?
I believe so. I don't know the exact number right off the top of my head.
Must have felt it was viable at one point in time.
Correct. There's a lot of things have changed in terms of cost of building materials and marketplace in the last year alone, let alone the last 3 years with the pandemic.
That's always interesting. I'm not sure I find that plausible. But if it is, if you're bringing cost up as an issue, maybe you need to send us the entire cost of the project and who gets paid, what, whom, and where, and so forth, so we can actually see if we agree with you or not on the costs. So I'm not sure you want to do that.
We don't have a cost list for phase 3 yet. I could ask the developer to produce a cost. Is ultimately that risk on cost is the developers, and board bears no liability for whether a project is economically viable necessarily. This man, a successful developer, has been doing it for a lot of years in both Clark and Cowlitz County. So if he asserts to me that the cost of a project is what it is, I have no reason to doubt him or turn down a project because of that.
Okay, I have reservations on that. That's probably beside the point. And one of the points on that is lots of people develop 1 or 2 houses. Lots of people develop much smaller stuff, but no point in going through that. The traffic stuff is the analysis you're doing, is it a linear analysis, or are you taking into account the nonlinearity of traffic?
Say that, excuse me, I didn't catch the second half of that.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, I beg your pardon. I didn't hear the second half. I apologize. I heard the linear, I heard you say linear, and then after that, I didn't understand.
Okay.
I didn't hear you.
Yeah,
Physically.
the point is that, the old saw about the straw that breaks the camel's back. Traffic is a lot like that. You can, if you're saying adding 20 extra trips or some number of trips per AM, that's not going to have any impact because we're already doing 80 trips or 120 trips. That's a linear approach that says I can just continue to add cars and there won't be what I call a catastrophic effect. And traffic isn't that way. Traffic gets catastrophic really fast. It's a pretty steep curve, but I'll bow to Patrick's feedback on that.
This is an age-old discussion, and it really comes down to code. It is there at some point there will be a short plat even, or one additional house that will trip it over and cause a problem on the intersection. that was the problem that Growth Management Act is trying to help eliminate. We don't utilize those codes, and so unfortunately, it does fall on whoever does that one that trips it over.
Right, and even in that study, or even under those assumptions, are we assuming a family, if we have a two-story family or one-story, there seems to be an issue, which I don't fully appreciate because I don't know how we quantified that, because with fewer numbers here, it is going to be predicated on, are they two-car family, three-car family, one-car family? That can make a huge difference as we get to the breaking point.
Understand, everything in traffic engineering is governed by the trip generation manual of the Institute of Transportation. And so a single family lot has a certain number of trips per lot that they allot to it. It doesn't matter if, you know, we're looking at.
I got it.
single-story or
What's
two-story.
what's the variance on that, or error bars?
I do not know when to get down into it. This isn't my specialty. I know enough to
Yeah,
review.
okay.
So, Patrick, you earlier said that the water supply system was designed way back when, and it's absolutely sufficient to meet future needs along Hall Road. And you said pretty much the same thing, that the sewer lines are adequately placed. They were built up. If I remember correctly, was right around 1998 when they did a massive investment. County made that decision to allow this kind of development to occur along Hall Road. And when I've traveled out on Hall Road, I've always been a little bit amazed that, unlike most of the other roads that predate the, it's a pretty wide road. It's a pretty well-sized road. And and again, I think that was part of that 1998 or the mid-90s decision to upgrade all the services. So based on the standards, the numbers of trips, do you anticipate, other than momentary congestion, as you mentioned in the afternoons, is it designed well enough to meet the capacity of this and infilling? I mean, the rest of the empty lots, if they're developed similarly?
I believe it is, yes.
That's a good question. Do you take that answer all the way through to the stop sign on the 504?
That is the biggest question, is that intersection. And I believe that we are at a level of service that is still acceptable. Whether the rest of this vacant land gets developed, it stays that way, I can't answer.
And there's
right now, I believe it is.
The future developments will still have the wetland problem as well, because it's all.
They'll have some.
there's-
It does start to rise out of that wetland. And I don't see that occurring anytime soon. The landowners are pretty adamant that they don't want development in that area. But when I have to think, we're pretty much thinking forever. So at some point in time, 50, 100, 200 years, someone's going to want to develop that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Little? Sir, thank you. Any other comments you want to make?
I'm available to answer any more questions. There's a lot of documentation, obviously, in this one after 5 workshops and hearings.
If you don't
So-
mind, why don't you just sit in one of the front pews? And
Sure.
If in case we need to ask you back. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Doug Heights. I happen to live in Silver Lake Village, Phase 1. Excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous.
And you testified at the planning commission too.
Pardon me?
You testified at the planning commission.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I have your statement in the minutes.
And I just kind of brief my little history with Silver Lake Village. My wife and I built or had a house built up there in 2020. We lived for 18 years in Woodland, and in Woodland, we had 5-foot setbacks. And of course, now with our home in Silver Lake, we have 5-foot setbacks there. It's not an issue. And none of the neighbors that I talked to, and I talked to a lot of them, they don't have issues with it either. We built up there because our neighborhood in Woodland was kind of going down the tubes. And one of the things that we really appreciated about Brad's construction was the inclusion of HOA. And I was so enamored by the HOA that I actually ran for the board. And I have been on board, and this is my 3rd year as being on the board. What we do is we just want the houses to maintain, the residents to maintain the houses. We don't ask that you look like Augusta National Golf Course. There's some issues, there've been some issues with parking, and we would prefer that you don't park your vehicles overnight. It's in the CCNRs. When we went up there originally to talk, we talked to Brad several times before we made our decision to buy. And he was always very willing to talk to us, answer our questions. And he'd let us walk through several of his homes that he was in the progress of building. The one thing I noticed was the quality of the homes. My dad actually was a builder all his life. And I know my dad would take his hat off to the homes that Brad built. They were very, very, very modestly priced. We moved from Woodland because we couldn't afford to move to Clark County. So we moved to Silver Lake. It is a little bit out of the way for driving, but you know what? It's worth it. Our houses are, the side of the development we live in is primarily all retired people. It's quiet as a mouse. Yeah. And the only noise we really ever hear is from Hall Road. And that's usually at peak times in the afternoons. Would I buy a home from Brad again? Yes, absolutely. And what I would like you to do is to unanimously approve phase 3 so Brad can get on with building it. I also have a message that was sent to me by John Turner, who also spoke at the Planning Commission. He's unable to be here, but he did send me a message I'd like to read to you, fellas.
We have that listed as John Tanner, that.
Tanner, T-A-N-N-E-R.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Said, I live at 155 Zephyr Drive, Silver Lake, Washington. We love the neighborhood because of the HOA that kept Silver Lake Village a clean and lovely neighborhood. Our son built here first and was very happy with the clean kept neighborhood, the build quality and price, and we wanted to have a similar house built. We consequently moved into our home in August of 2019. We love our house and the excellent quality of the build. The neighborhood has a nice mix of diverse ages of families, from newlyweds and young families with children up to the retired, and Larry across the street from me who passed away a few months ago from old age. I also have 3 grandchildren that live in the development. The attractiveness of the neighborhood has a lot to do with the fact that they are all single floor houses. The design, I believe, is key to the attractiveness into the neighborhood. The adjustment to the setback gives enough width to allow for very functional and affordable single-story homes. If we don't continue to design this the same way, 2-story homes will not be desirable for older adults who would need to traverse stairs. And the demographics of the neighborhood, it would change the demographics of the neighborhood. If we can continue with the current design, it will keep the neighborhood looks attractiveness that has made living here desirable. It's because of good management of neighborhoods like Silver Lake that I think that makes Washington and our county a great place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Heights.
Yeah, question. Your name is Doug, right?
Yes, Doug.
Okay, thank you. This to me is really strange because usually when somebody comes to the podium, they're not trying to support anything. They're trying to debunk or push or quash something. What, can you tell me what your interest is in trying to get this built?
Well, I'll be quite honest with you. I don't have a dog in the fight. I have talked to Brad about this new phase 2 and 3. I'm fine if it goes in, I'm fine if it doesn't go in. But what bothers me the most is that there's been a lot of innuendo falsehoods put out on social media about our actual, where we live, and about Brad the builder and what they anticipate for problems with phase 3. And I don't think it's fair for to him to kowtow to the social media.
Okay, let me say, I haven't seen much of that, but I would, now let me say it like this. So you don't care if it gets built or not built?
Right.
Okay, thank you on that. Oh, and the HOA comments, that's probably something Nick will have to answer, but I'll ask you, the HOAs for phase 2 and phase 3, are they tied with your current HOA?
They will be.
Okay, and that's in some contract someplace?
I beg your pardon?
And that's a contractual agreement. If we approve this, I know that there'll be a single HOA handling all three phases.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's one of the conditions of approval, right, Daniel?
That is correct. It's incorporated in the conditions of approval that phase 3 would be either included or need to have an HOA. The same thing with phase 2 when it was approved.
They'll have to be tied. Their stormwater facilities are connected together.
Okay, yeah, it seems strange. Phase 1 is extant. It's got its own HOA. And currently it's independent of anything that happens on phase 2 and phase 3, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And somehow there's an aspiration to make that HOA. I mean, I don't see how you're going to be able to do that, but that's, I don't think it's enforceable to say phase 2 and phase 3 will be under our HOA.
It's a pretty common practice in multi-phase developments to enlarge the HOA as the phases come in.
Right, but I said enforceable. I think phase 2 could have its own HOA, and HOA phase 1 is not going to be able to do anything about that. Okay, anyhow, and then you mentioned single-story homes versus two-story homes. I'm not sure I understand it, but I can accept it. Is that contractually written that if you get the 5-foot setback variance, that it will be single-family homes and only, I mean, it'll be single-floor homes and only single-story homes?
I don't understand your question.
Okay, I am told that the reason to go to the 5-foot setback versus the 10 is so that we can put single floor homes. And then you come up and testify and say how much nicer the ambiance of the community is not having 2-story homes. So then I'm asking, is the builder legally bound somehow to put only single-story homes on the property?
I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, I don't see how that can be made also. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the list wants to add comments? Nick?
Morning, commissioners, back again. So the HOA would have to be compliant with the state law, the Washington Uniform Common Interest and Ownership Act, which is passed in 2018. It's a pretty significant state law regarding composition of HOAs, their responsibilities and whatnot, and it would be integrated with phase 1 and 2 and 3. Can be addressed in the bylaws from phase 1. What the retaining of those rights is commonly called declarant rights. And those are basically more or less the rights for the developer to continue on multiple phases of development and retroactively add them into established homeowners associations. The most recent example of this was Tulip Meadows, phase 1 and phase 2. That was just like this one, Kiowa compliant and declarant rights were retained. So it goes very smoothly. Kiowa, good, bad, or different. I'm sure there's all kinds of opinions on it, but it is very strict. Much more so than anything that was on the books or with the Cowlitz County or statewide prior to that.
So I know the biggest challenge with HOA isn't right now. It's later on in 10, 15 years as ownership changes and interest
Sure.
goes. And we've got plenty of examples where the HOAs are struggling. They're not, nobody participates, and it's a thankless job. So.
Well, and it was a big issue historically too, when you would see like stormwater facilities come up on the county's tax sales. Because the HOA wouldn't have a funding mechanism in place, or they would disband. The concept of the Kiowa, I don't have the RCW citation, I apologize. The concept behind that was to prevent that exact thing from happening. So it establishes funding mechanisms, who pays for what and whatnot, and prevents that from happening. At the will of the board, I understand that there's, we're standing here telling you what the product is, what the product was established for phase 1. And if there's a level of distrust there that it might be, so all of a sudden become, a bait and switch option where now we're doing 2-story homes and approvals are predicated on 1. It's not the intent. The owner would accept a plat condition for 1-story homes, provided that there are a few lots that there will be a daylight. So, that's not technically a 2-story home, but it's in a gray area. So we'd like that to, we would address that up front. And if it's the will of the board to add that as a plat condition, we would accept that if that puts the concern at ease. So.
Okay. Any other questions for him? All right. Anyone else on the list? Okay, we'll close the hearing. We have a recommendation from our planning commission for approval, accepting the findings of facts and the conditions of approval as presented. Did I paraphrase it correctly? Yeah. What are your wishes? Well, actually, we don't do this very often, so if it is the wish to deny this subdivision, what's the process that we need to do to comply with the law?
We would need to prepare findings for a motion to deny. That would provide the applicant the opportunity to, appeal properly. You do have the option to approve with conditions, both the waiver and the subdivision itself. You do have the option to approve the subdivision, but not the waiver. And of course, you do have the option to deny both.
Thank you. All right.
Dennis, if I might.
No, you can't.
Oh, I can't?
It jeopardizes the legal process. We got to ask staff or somebody who's on the lodge. Sorry, I mean, I wish I could, but
So Commissioner,
But you closed the hearing.
if you're looking for a motion to deny I believe the motion would be to direct staff to create findings to bring back to you at such time. That would be the motion that you would vote a denial at that point. It wouldn't be this time that you would deny it. We would need to create the
so we
findings.
refer it back to staff to find conditions
Correct.
for disapproval.
Correct.
Here's what I would tell you is I can get comfortable with everything but the wetlands. I'm not gonna approve anything that runs a road through the wetlands. I don't care that we can pay money and mitigate it someplace else. It's not, that wetlands will be permanently different, altered than it is now. So you're gonna have to find a different access, or the county's gonna have to say it's okay. But anything that puts a road through that wetlands, I won't agree to.
Commissioner, Chairman, may I respond to that real quick?
What?
May I respond to that? We serve at your pleasure, Commissioner. And so our recommendation is to have the road for safety and circulation, but it is your prerogative to make a motion to approve it without that road in place. I don't think the developer would argue too much.
Then that would be a motion I'd be willing to do, that I would, I worry about the traffic, although I've been out there enough to look at it just myself, because I believe my own eyes over somebody that works just off a number sheet. And the intersection down at the highway concerns me a little bit, and I don't know how much more you're gonna be able to do, but for most of the time you're out there, the traffic, I think if you just controlled the speed and did some things, most of the people would be happy out there. I think we can live with the traffic right now. I'm taking your word on the sewer and water that these people aren't gonna be impacted on that. But, so I would be okay with the development, but not the road across the wetlands. And that would be my motion.
So we have a motion for approval with the exception of the access road intersecting with Stout. Is it? Discussion?
I didn't really hear a motion specifically.
So he moved to approve the project minus the road through the wetlands.
Oh, boy.
And that was a condition of approval, right? So we're removing that condition of approval.
Yeah, I probably will. I don't know what I'm gonna do, so if I blabber a little bit, maybe my mind will focus on a solution. Whenever we get presented things as numbers, I really feel like it's important for us to, and assertions, it's important for us to make it clear what those things mean. And all too often I'm unhappy because people say things that really they cannot stand behind and are incomplete, and they're like promises, like Nick used the word, it's not the intent. Well, I've been burned so often with not the intent, and sometimes it's innocent and sometimes it's not. I'm in a position here where my principals say it's private property. He ought to be able to do whatever he wants there. Well, what if he wants to build a lead smelter? Do I have an obligation to other people around there? And the answer is yes. Do I have obligation to other people in the area about the traffic? And the answer in my book is yes. I don't know how to balance those things. I don't buy some of the salesmanship. It's just, there are proclamations or statements made to try and sell the issue, and there are too many holes in that. That being said, I'm still conflicted as to go with it or not. As to the wetlands road itself, to me, that's too strident a position. There are many factors that come into play. Do I like this mitigation concept? Absolutely not. Not that in this particular case it is the one I don't like. I just don't like in general. And my colleague pointed out, if there's a wetlands problem, how does paying someone in some other part of the state change that? And it doesn't, of course. It's just government bureaucracy at it. So I've stalled long enough, and I still don't know what I'm going to do. It's Rick Dahl's his district. I don't agree with the motions, but I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to abstain right now. If we could, maybe the chairman would entertain, I don't know if it's possible, coming back, let's think about it for a week or two. It maybe will give Nick a chance to break my arm, or the owner to come in and convince me about some things. But that's probably not a legitimate thing to do, considering it's a closed hearing. And so I'm a little antsy there also. I cannot buy time. So I will abstain on this.
So one of the factors that sways me on an issue like this is, have we made policy decisions that would favor this kind of level of development, if it can meet the environmental and the other kinds of rules and requirements? And we have approved urban level land use classification for this area. The county, for a generation or two, have poured resources into upgrading utilities and roadways to handle this type of this level of development. We have also talked an awful lot about the lack of affordable housing. That's a function of the market. We need to have more houses built. That certainly is another check mark in terms of addressing overall housing conditions in this county. And as someone who is, I'm going to retire one of these days, single level homes are attractive. So I don't mind having a lot more single family homes. Commissioner Dahl, I appreciate your concerns about the wetland and the mitigation. It is a little bit incomprehensible to me that the Corps or ecology would accept mitigation in a completely different watershed, which is the Cowlitz River. But we have also had discussions about creating a mitigation bank of our own on the Toutle. So there may be a time when perhaps the mitigation might be acceptable, but we're not there yet with that concept and idea. So I certainly will vote in favor of the motion. I just have a process, because we're taking out a condition. Do we need to have you come back with the final thing? Okay, good. So the motion before us is to accept the proposal as recommended by the Planning Commission and staff, minus the road crossing the wetlands, which was one of the conditions of approval. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those abstaining? I will also vote aye. That motion does pass.
Commissioners,
Thank you. Yes.
you'll vote on the variance. The 5-foot setback, 10 versus.
That has to be a separate motion. I thought that was part of the recommendation. You want to make a motion to accept the waiver of the back to 5?
Yeah, I would make a motion to accept the waiver back to 5 feet. It's been done in the others, and it seems like it works.
Any other Any discussion? Motion before us is to approve the waiver to allow 5-foot setbacks. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Yeah.
I also vote aye. That motion does carry 2-1. 2-0 and 1 abstention. Do it correctly. Thank you very much. That brings us back to item 5, the motion item, sending the edited letter to Cynthia Brown at the Federal Surface Transportation Board. And did you make, we don't have a motion.
We have no motion yet.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just curious, who wrote the letter?
So I believe it was Patriot Rail that drafted it and gave it to the COG and asked them to have us sign on. So they were requesting the extension as well.
And Patriot Rail is the one that wants to abandon the rail line?
Right, correct.
So they put all the, because that was for me, was the language in it. It was so overly supportive that, you know, to say it's for them to say it's like they're gifting it to us and then they're kind of going through this process to offer this, you know, amount of support for it.
And what I don't know whether or not that is a template that the Surface Transportation Board uses for rail abandonment issues. I don't know. the
Right.
source. Can't tell.
And then for the, just the motion of choosing a new chair or whatever. I get, you know, it's getting late in the day.
Well, that'll
But-
be next week.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I agree with some of it and it was, you know, it's a little painful to watch anyone kind of get beat up. If it were me, I mean, kind of like you mentioned, and if it were me up there, I just want to do it today and not have to go through this again. But I know it's getting kind of late in the day, so that'd just be my recommendation. But thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you like a motion?
You bet.
I move that we approve the edited letter to Cynthia Brown of the section of administration regarding docket number AB 1244X, Columbian Cowlitz LLC Abandonment Exemption.
You've heard the motion. Any questions? Comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion carries. Now, public comment. Are there any other items that need to be brought to our attention?
I just want an education on what just happened with the approval of that. I understand the closed hearing. And then when you closed it, and there's nothing on the agenda that said it was going to be an action item. So I don't understand the process, why that just happened the way it did. I just want to understand that.
Typically, these kinds of hearings, you know, culminate in an action being taken. But
Okay. I got no problem with that, but I guess I would have preferred to see something on here that said that it was here for approval. That other than just a hearing, because this only references you're having a closed hearing. It doesn't tell me you're doing any action item. Or that there's a recommendation to be approved from anybody else. So, okay, just a sidebar. Thank you.
thank you.
This is one of the things that has been up before. And the more I hear about it, the more upset I get about. And this doesn't necessarily pertain to the county itself, but it's a state matter. And it has to do with the recording fee that were assessed, I guess. I'm not sure how to categorize that. but I went to the auditor's office to get some detail on that. And so any property that needs to be recorded for refinancing or sale or such as that has a charge of $2,003.50.
2,000?
Not $203.50. Sorry.
You should have seen the looks on the audience behind you.
But when it comes down to what the fee actually is, it covers the recording, and that recording being taken care of from the time that it was initially recorded and the time that there is a sale or a refinancing or such as that. The cost comes to $19.89. So there's an overcharge on that. And I know they call it a fee, but a fee is a tax. You can say it's a fee tax if you want to categorize it, but it's a tax. And the other money that's allocated, a good part to deal with homeless or affordable housing, if you can address that, I'm not sure that you can. But the people that are getting this recording, the money that they're paying is $19.89 that actually is for the recording. Anything beyond that, some of it goes to the county, most of it goes to the state. But in the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution, get the place here. Shall any person be subject for the same offense to twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken from the public use without just compensation. And that part, that last part, property being taken without just compensation is missing there. There's no just compensation. The funds that is used goes for other areas that has nothing to do with recording. Essentially, I see it as, I'd liken it unto extortion. It becomes a theft. Yeah, and I know this is a state thing, yeah, but I think the public needs to be aware that this has been enacted and many people have paid into this. And when the county withholds those funds from those activities that they have listed, I think that's proper. That money should be returned to the taxpayer, or to the fee, the payer of that fee, because that was his property. And it's taken, and there's no compensation to him on that, in any of those things that's given. And I think the public needs to be aware of that, because it only affects the people that are in purchasing or refinancing or something like that. And all that adds to the cost of housing, which actually creates a greater problem for the people that can't afford to get into housing. And I just see that this thing is wrong and needs to be addressed. It seems like they'd be open for a class action suit against the state, and that money would have to be returned.
And I don't know how you do that. You know, it's kind of like unpeeling a potato. But when we have those things happening and people have come here on a regular basis, and the purpose of that is try to make corrections that have taken place in the Constitution. And the reason that we've had this happen is because people haven't read their Constitution. And I've been guilty of that too. And so the public needs to be here, but they need to read the Constitution and understand where they're at. And there's two constitutions, a United States Constitution and there's a state constitution. And if you read further, it even goes beyond that. And so that Constitution is to protect us as citizens from being violated by the state. It is not a law that gives the state powers. It gives a restriction on what the states can do. And we put up with that because it's easier just to put up with it than to say anything about it. But if the public becomes aware and does what they need to do, those that have used this method because they haven't read the Constitution either, then we can start to curtail this sort of thing and make corrections. And we're all human and we can run into error. And with the issue that come up tonight, or today, it is a bit embarrassing to me, not because I was involved, but I get embarrassed when somebody has erred. And the best outcome is to make a correction with the individual and with the whole process. But the people have to get involved. And so I'm just using this as a bully puppet. To make that clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the
Appreciate it.
opportunity and appreciate your service. And Dennis is on my section of the county as a representative. I voted for him. He's been a great resource for understanding how the process goes, at least as how it has been done. But we really need to get it back in place. And that's a big task. Thank you for your service.
Just a question. Do I dare ask you? I'm going to ask you rhetorically. How do you feel about the recent Washington State Supreme Court decision about income tax?
Well, I'm not sure if I know what decision you're.
No, I'm saying I agree with everything you said wholeheartedly. However, we have a system that has violated the Constitution since back in the Jeffersonian days, and it's just gotten more and more and more accepted. And very recently, we had a constitutional challenge on the capital gains tax. And the Supreme Court of the state said, oh yeah, that's a valid tax. So I was just being a little bit snide saying, I'm not sure what exactly we can do to appeal for these things.
Well, it's kind of interesting to me that there's laws regulating what it is when a person violates their oath of office. And everybody that's in government, even if they're employed, takes an oath of office. And yet at the same time, they say, well, they've got immunity. And I say, how can you do that? If the oath of office is the supreme law and anything contrary to it is no law at all, then why are they using an immunity? Where did this come in at? I'm not sure. I haven't studied that to that point, but it's something that the citizens need to understand and then hold their officials accountable to that.
The best way to do that in this day and age is at the polls. There's a lot that has to be reversed. That's in Olympia and in DC, and you just got to elect the people to do it. But people don't seem to be willing to do that because they're concerned about their next paycheck from the government.
Well, that's there's just a complacency that's there. It's amongst the citizenry and it's amongst the elected officials. And we just allowed that to just come to a rot to the point that it becomes intolerable for the public. And so you're creating a situation where eventually you may come to a revolution. And we don't want that. So to make people aware is important, that they understand how it's supposed to be and what their liberties really are. We just give up a lot of our liberties because it's easier just to go along to get along. And so the public has to take the brunt of this as much as elected officials do. But some of them are bad actors, you know, they're in there, they know full well what they're doing. And there ought to be some occasions where the force of the law is placed upon those that are judged to be bad actors, doing it knowing full well what they're doing. So the public knows that there's going to be some kind of pushback from the courts. Just my position.
I think probably, if I can venture an opinion, I think that probably the most difficult challenge facing, arguably the most difficult challenge facing this nation in the next 15 or 20 years is how we deal with the impending bankruptcy of Social Security. You talk about no compensation. People have paid in all their lives and the standards are changing because it's unsustainable. So that's, you know, how
I'm
important
glad you said
Social
that,
Security is to everybody, because that's going to be a generational war.
I'm glad you said there's that many years because I got one escape.
Thanks. I always appreciate you coming up and your dissertations are certainly always welcome.
Getting back to recording fees. And I know you don't like the print press, Commissioner Mortensen, but this deals directly with those recording fees. And it pertained to a front page news that the organization that runs Community House got $5.3 million for youth shelters. And on the back page, it directly addresses the Cowlitz County document recording fees through the currently open request for proposal for homeless and housing projects. And it's a direct quote from you, Mr. Mortensen, as I'm reading verbatim. Mortensen said, "We really need to do that. It's right and safe," you said. And here's the punchline, the last paragraph. "The commissioners will review proposals after the request closes on April 11th. I never knew the total amount the county had. The county has 2.7 million of document recording fee revenues in the bank and brings in about 1 million per year, but none addressed to what the other gentleman previously alluded to record the fees, which are not here. The documents aren't here. They never were. They're up in Olympia. So you people have actually almost $3 million of document recording fees, and you're going to entertain a request for these. And the man who's gonna direct it, Frank Morrison, and they point to a list of buildings on 12th Avenue from the old Coach restaurant clear on down the other second block on 12th Avenue. And it notices they recently received the 5.3 million state grant to help fund the project. And they're going to come to you April 11th, to dip in the public trough of the 2.7 million. And yet the county brings in $1 million a year. I didn't know that till I read this article. Is all that true? Do you have 2.7 million in the bank? And you draw 1 million a year in these recording fees?
That's, the latter part is not true.
What
was-
part of the 2.7 million and $1 million a year?
That's the former part. The former part is true. We've got about that in the bank.
But you disavow that you receive $1 million a year in these recording fees?
The problem when you start to pick stuff like this is that there's stuff that's out of date. So for example, $1 million a year was before the city of Longview decided that they were going to get their dock recording fee portion.
Which
directly
the
to them.
commissioners portioned out from this 2.7 million and the other $1 million a year you get.
So back when the document recording fees were set up, the state recommended and encouraged the cities to consolidate their document recording fees with the counties to address the county's homeless and affordable housing programs. So we've been collecting that $1 million, and that's a fairly accurate, it's been gradually increasing. It depends on the amount of activity with recording deeds and stuff. So it's not $1 million appropriated, it's whatever is collected when people buy and sell property, because that's when the recording, for the most part, that's when the recordings happen. So $600,000 was last year's portion for Longview, and they sent us a letter saying they want it back.
No, 300,000.
There's just three. Anyway, so there's a portion that will stay with the cities. So that's why there's hesitation on, are we getting $1 million each year? That number's changing.
Well, additional money from the state, according to the Sunday front page article, with Senator Braun and Senator Wilson. Senator Braun obviously took the money that was coming to Cowlitz County. Whatever happened to the term limitations, I don't know.
So when he mentioned the document recording fee, he mentioned that a big portion of it goes to the state. And so the state has their funds that they make available for housing programs. And so that's what they were referring to, using that money that the state authorizes. And apparently Lewis County is welcoming homeless people, so.
Well, the way the article read, being Senator Braun obviously had more authority. He took it and there was no discussion from Senator Wilson. I love how this game is played.
I don't know.
Well, but the money was earmarked for Cowlitz County, according to the article.
Earlier in the process that had initially been proposed. But that process continues to work and they make changes. They make changes all the time.
Well, you're welcome to attend another 4:30 meeting this evening at the so-called event center where they'll naturally approve the 318,000 from this hotel developer that's going to put a hotel on public property in a security zone. That ought to be interesting. Organization, I believe you commissioners set up. And that's a real interesting read, especially about the exchange of property. And what I can't figure out, how the hell can Longview exchange property within the city of Kelso? Because I remember the authorization was signed by Don Jensen, who was the mayor of Kelso.
Longview. Don Jensen's.
Don Jensen was,
Mayor of Longview.
well, how can he be in West Kelso? Well, obviously he can because you people put this organization in effect in 2013.
Interesting, the city limits are the sidewalk along the fairgrounds along Washington Avenue. So it's in the city of Longview.
And it goes all the way to the courthouse on
Well,
Third Avenue?
well, a portion of the courthouse is in Longview too. Yeah. It's on the right on the border.
Well, all I gotta say, it's a hell of a way to run a railroad.
And since you brought up the state Supreme Court and its decision regarding our taxes and calling it an excise tax, we have to remember that you say Social Security, I think law and justice, with transparency and representing the citizens is the biggest issue. We have to remember that most of the Supreme Court is represented by attorneys or the law association. We also know that they work for whoever their client is, and they can split the words and split everything down to whatever they want for that client. Unfortunately, our Supreme Court is not working for us, the citizens, in representing us. They're representing their constituents, the Inslee and the Attorney General and the staff in Olympia. So until we get that straightened out, so our courts, and at the national level too, start representing us, the citizens, we are in bigger trouble than just Social Security.
Well, we seem to be talking about state issues today. So we know that the state Supreme Court is mostly appointed by Inslee. It's been so they're going to go along with whatever he says, just like when we voted for $30 car tabs, same thing. Here's the point. We've discussed the Constitution, state and federal, and here's the thing. You guys up there just say no. Say, no, we're not going to collect a document recording fee. It's not right. It's not done right. It's unconstitutional. And it's the same thing with the excise tax. It's the same thing with car tabs. You guys just tell those guys over there, say, hey, they're coming in for their car tabs, pay their $30, they get their car tab. And tell the state. And that's what you got to do, because we're going to be forever crushed by the big population centers. And again, we know we live in a republic. It's not supposed to be mob rule. It's supposed to be us individuals. And that's not what we have right now. And we're in dire jeopardy, and we all know this. And unless we can start getting you guys to stand up to that stuff, we can stand up there all day, man. I've gone up to Olympia and held a protest sign, didn't do any good at all. And until we get some kind of traction in our down here local governments, then we're never going to get ahead of this. You guys got to stand up there and just say, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to collect a dumbass recording fee. We're not going to enforce a gosh darn ridiculous gun crap they're coming up with, which we've already kind of done. You know, you guys got to stand up there and say, we're not doing it. And I say, $30 car tabs for everybody. Let's start today. I'm going to renew mine immediately.
Just one comment to you. Yeah, the protests up in Olympia, until they start to look like the numbers as in the million man march or the Vietnam War protest marches, nothing will get done. So
exactly.
You may point the finger at us, and I certainly accept the blame. You have little appreciation for the complete tie-in that is involved, and that's just, from your perspective, I'd say that's just an excuse for us guys. But don't forget, you determine it at the poll and you determine it at the protest. The largest protest I've ever seen at the Monticello Square has been 300 people. I mean, get 3,000 people up there and you'll start to get some action. But currently, people just don't want to be bothered. They're happy. Oh, I'm sorry, those fees don't apply to me, so I'm not gonna be paying the $203, which I think is gonna be $303. So we have to start thinking in a republic way as opposed to a what's in it for me way specifically. I mean, we are bought
It's true.
all the time.
But you know what I find is, and same thing happened with me. You got a job, you're working your ass off. A lot of times you got work those days when things are going on. People are struggling so much to get by. You can't afford to take an afternoon off and go try and take part in something. Most all of us, I think, are retired now. And it wasn't until I retired that I had the time to start looking into things more deeply. And when I did, it was shocking. And and how far down the road we have gotten in the wrong direction is going to take some massive turnaround points. And I agree with you. We need a lot more people. Some of us are out there raising the troops, now, but this is going to go on for a long time. This will never be resolved in my lifetime. I know that. I can only try to hopefully make a little chip at it, and then my generations can follow on to try and bring it back to what it should be. But in the meantime, we need some strong statements, and we need to have you guys with the resolutions and things like this, which I think shouldn't have to happen. But what course can we take right now? And like I say, I believe, and at least in all the thousands of some people that I personally have spoken to at their doorsteps, everybody's disgusted by this. But at the end of the day, what do? Do you just quit work and start becoming an activist? People can't do that. You got to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. And they're making that harder and harder and harder to do all the time. So people have even less choice of how much they can be involved in these things. And so
I agree with you, but big issue is trust, and you cannot trust us.
no, I think we've
agree.
established that here in just the time that we've been here. We can't trust what goes on here. I've seen so many backroom and little slide deals take place here. And it is well, I don't want to say the C word, but I'll just say un-American.
I agree with you, but let us not excuse what happens at the polls.
Well, that's a
Is the
funny thing
governor-
about the polls. I don't think a lot of people here even trust the polls. Now, personally, I think our auditor here does a good job. I think our local elections are pretty squared away. I can't speak to the state. I have no faith in them at all. Here's a conclusion I've come to, and it was a while back, but I'll just share it, is my government has been lying to me all my whole life. Everything I've ever seen my whole life from the government has been a goddamn lie. And I mean, where do you even begin to unravel this stuff? And it's like, everybody's tired of it. We're all tired of this kind of like the ruling elite. And you guys aren't so bad here, but you go over to Longview and sit through their council meeting. They just have absolute disdain for the fact that people would come there and watch their dirty activities. And it's dirty pool all the way around. And it's like, you think, wow, how screwed up could a city get? How much crap could go on? But every time you go to one of these things, there's more. And it's just like, we're really getting tired of it. And we're really trying to do something about it. But you guys should be standing up and saying, no, we're not going to collect. Now Cowlitz County by itself, no. But we've got all these other counties that see things the way we do. You guys need to form some kind of coalition or something and just go. No, we're not going to do it. And if the Supreme Court comes here, our sheriff needs to stand out at the city limits, big old posse, and tell them to keep moving. And it's the same thing when they were trying to shut down Stuffies and trying to hurt these restaurants. Our law enforcement people should have been arresting the guys, those L&I scumbags that were coming here to kill our businesses. And they're selectively doing it. You never saw Walmart get served with one of those things. I never had to wear a mask in Walmart, never had to wear one over at Lowe's, never had to wear one at any big restaurant. But gosh darn Stuffies, Or, you know, we had the restaurant revolution. I don't want to get spiffies and stuffies mixed up, but then there was farm boys and stuff. You know, they're just killing those guys, and our local guys are, you know, like our local law enforcement. I don't want to jump on the sheriff because I chew on him all the time anyway, but it's like, we have to stand up. We have to say, no, you can't impose a fine on stuffies. We're not going to allow it. And we'll stand here shoulder to shoulder and make sure you don't. And if it's just us, then let's take the line and go.
So I'm here to thank you guys for passing the Second Amendment ordinance resolution. I don't remember which it was. Can you tell me who all signed that resolution? Did everyone that was on the list sign that resolution?
Think we'll.
I missed the beginning. What? what resolution?
The Second Amendment resolution.
Yeah, everybody saw it.
Everybody signed it? Okay.
No. Ryan Jermakainen didn't sign it.
Okay.
But Brad,
He did.
No, if you feel that way, I would make an appointment to go talk to him. There are a lot of reasons. I've stopped long ago trying to judge why somebody does or doesn't do something. I look at the aggregate after a long period of time. So, but I recommend you go talk to him.
If we wanted to talk to him, would we apply for the George Soros organization, or would this be directly to his office? Just curious.
Okay, I'll take, we've talked about a lot of things we have that are beyond our control that we're hoping that you can do something about. Again, I'm going to get back. There's one little thing that you do have the control to start doing something about regarding affordable housing and housing. And that is to get in support with your engineering department and recognize that when building plans, structures throughout the county are submitted by a licensed engineer, that they are accepted as that, and you don't waste any more time and energy on that. You can do that working with your planning and building department and recognizing, because when you mark up the drawings, you are destroying the liability of that licensed engineer. Secondly, you can set the precedent. So when I try to build over in Grant County or other place, I have a precedent that I can say, well, here's what Cowlitz County is doing. Why can't you do that? You can start that little tiny step.
and I do, while I will be attending, I have attended and will continue to attend Building Planning Advisory Committee, and those are some of the same things on my mind, Ron. I totally agree with you. Once, you know, when you accept a plan from that engineer and something goes wrong with that plan, you as a consumer have some recourse against that firm because they did it wrong. But once we change all their specs, you don't have any recourse anymore. And so I struggle with us taking away your ability to have recourse against a firm or somebody.
Okay.
Down there. Hey, I'm here today to talk about Young Road in Kelso.
Which road?
Young
Road?
Road. It's in Rose Valley. See, your building planning guys ran out real quick, but you know, I sit here and listen to you guys talk about safety, public safety, public safety, public safety. There was really no consideration when they built. They allowed all these building permits up on Young Road. So far, there's been 15 brand new houses built. There's another spot for another I think 13 houses to be built. They're opening up another 40 acres to have houses built. Plus there's another 78 acres right on the end of Young Road that's up for sale, because on the backside of Bodine, they're building houses up there. The road's a 1-lane road. And there's been a lot of people going in the ditches. They don't care, driving through people's yards, just going up and down that road. Any of you driven up it?
I may have, I don't recall.
By going up it with a dump truck coming down, doing 30 miles an hour.
And
You
is
gotta
it,
go in the ditch.
I know that in some of the rural areas, we have quite a few neighborhoods that are connected on private roads. They never were built to county standards.
Well,
And I don't know if Young Road is, I mean, it sounds like that might be the
it's a
case.
county road.
But it is a
Because you know,
county-
right at the end of my, right at my house,
Mm.
you know what it says?
End of county road.
In the county road.
Okay, okay.
And I've asked for simple things, but safety's out the door. We don't want your tax money. That's like my tax this year. You guys were talking about taxes. My house went up 125,000 this year because of that brand new development up there. So, I bid it hard, paying $5,500 a year. Now it's up to 67. So you guys are pricing me out of my house. I did, I just got the information about 3 weeks ago, opened up that letter and Jesus. But, I even asked, what fog lines are? Pretty important, aren't they? Fog lines on the road? Is that white line?
Mhm.
How would you like going up a road when it's foggy? You don't even know where the road is. I gotta go 2-3 miles an hour just to get up my road. I've asked for fog lines. They're too busy. They can't put fog lines on the road. Oh, something else I would like to ask is 20 miles an hour till they get the road widened out. And put a new road in called Mustang Road. It's a private road, no stop sign. They just shoot right out. I've seen people go down the ditch because people just shoot out, don't even look. They don't have the common sense to stop and look. But hey, I'm not the only one. The other one, the guy that was here with me, he's been waiting. He has things to do. And, it's a dangerous road. Very, very dangerous. And if you go in the ditch, a lot of them, there's the big rocks. Not the little rounded, nice, rounded off, the jagged rocks. When you go off, and if you get into some areas, straight over the hillside. So I mean, I don't even know why they even spent handing out all these permits for these houses, not even thinking about the road. Oh yeah, hey, we're about 40th on the list. I found that out about taking care of the road. But they raised my taxes $6,700 a year. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll follow up on that.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else? All right. I think we are done with business for today. Meeting is adjourned.